Good to see everybody. Welcome to another Conversations with Legends series. Before we get started, I'm going to go through this super quick because I want to spend as much time with Cate as possible. Upcoming events every Wednesday, 3 o'clock. We have Champions Chats every Thursday at noon. We have TCC Labs. Our book club this month, we are reading Overcome by Jason Redman. Jason is a very famous Navy SEAL. Jason will be joining us April 19th to talk about the book Overcome. Whether you've read it or not, show up. Our next book is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. This is an absolute classic, New York Times bestseller. She'll be with us on May 3rd. And then we are doing Bet on Talent with Deanne Turner. Deanne Turner is the 30-year head of talent for Chick-fil-A, and she'll be joining us in June. Conversations with, we have Tony Neves, who wrote this incredible book. This is not in our book club, but we've got Tony. He's an incredible speaker. He's joining us April 5th. So that's our next one after Cate. Then we have Jess Ekstrom. Jess is the founder of Headbands of Hope, and she wrote this book called Chasing the Bright Side. She is an absolute badass, love her to death. And then we have Alacia Abate. She is one of the leading futurists, and she is joining us May 10th. So we have a lot of new members. We are growing like crazy. So for those of you who have never been on a Conversations with Legends series, this is the way it works. We're going to spend about 25, 30 minutes, Cate and I, chatting a little bit, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. When we open it up for Q&A, actually before that, just in the chat, let us know that you have a question. You do not have to put what your question is. Just say that you have a question. Kathy Leckie will tee me up, and you can ask the question directly to Cate Luzio. So, you know, this is a special series for us. We've had absolutely amazing people on, and today is no different. You know, I think legends leave a legacy, and we lost a legend yesterday. So Jesse Itzler's father, Dan Itzler, passed away yesterday. So I wanted to dedicate today's conversation to Dan, who was an amazing guy. And for those of you who know Jesse, they were super close, and my heart goes out to Jesse for his loss. But I wanted to dedicate today to Dan Itzler. So we are extremely blessed. I got introduced to this incredible woman by a mutual friend, Kara Golden. Kara said, "You've got to get to know Cate Luzio." And I didn't ask her why. I knew that it was going to be a phenomenal connection. And I would say 5 minutes into our conversation, I was like, oh my God, I love her. And Cate is just an incredible friend now. So for those of you who don't know Cate, she's the founder and CEO of Luminary in New York, which is an incredible space, but more than an incredible space, it's incredible what they do and the mission that they're on. She's been named Forbes' Next 1,000 Entrepreneurs, Inc.'s Top 100 Female Founders. She's led international banking at Bank of America, HSBC, JP Morgan. She's a multiple-time Most Powerful Women in Banking, a 3-time Global Diversity Champion. She contributes to Fast Company, Wealth, Business Insider. She was on Cheddar yesterday. We're going to talk about why. She's a graduate of Georgetown and the University of Maryland, who plays Stanford on Friday, I believe. Stanford's #1. I know Cate is going to will them to victory. So that is going to be fun. She's on a ton of boards, but she is an absolute powerhouse and somebody that I pinch myself that I get to call her a friend. So Cate, welcome to the Talent Champions Council. We are very, very happy to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always, I don't like the word imposter syndrome because I feel like we can do better than that. But I always sometimes feel when you're, especially someone like you, Scott, is reading about that, I feel a little bit like an imposter, right? Because I've been on these conversations and everyone that I've participated in, they are true legends. I think I'm still a little bit farther away from that.
You are a legend. So legends leave legacies, and you are leaving a huge legacy. And I'm going to get into kind of currently what's going on, because you've got a survey out there in connection with Indeed. It's why you were on Cheddar yesterday. It's why Time and New York Times and everybody else is all over this. And I think it's super interesting. But I wanted to start. So you had this insane career in banking, just like unbelievable career. And a little over 4 years ago, you decided to start Luminary. For those people on the call that may be unfamiliar with Luminary, what was the initial thought? What was really the need that you saw? And tell us a little bit about that. And then I think, what you've done in leading Luminary, especially through the last 2 years, is unbelievable. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. Hello, everyone. I actually prefer not to have speaker view so I can see everyone's faces. So I'm glad that I have that view going. So I, as Scott mentioned, a very long, 2-decade-long career in banking. And most people ask me, oh, you must have been so excited to leave it and start your own thing. I actually loved my job. I love what I did. I built, I think, a pretty phenomenal career in a short time, leading multi-billion-dollar P&Ls and huge global businesses. My last several roles at JP Morgan and then HSBC. But like many people in corporate America, particularly those that are from underrepresented communities like women, I was on the side of my desk very involved in all of our DE&I efforts, the pipeline, where were the women, why were they leaving? And I had a very different career, mainly because I didn't have children. And I say that because I could pick up and move to Mexico or China or London. And I didn't have to consider what that meant for my family. At the time I had a husband, so I had to consider that. But I didn't have some of the complexities that many women or working parents or caregivers have. And so I like to address that because most people will say, well, how did you move up so quickly? I do believe that there was a lot of that. I also worked really hard and I had incredible sponsors and mentors, the majority of those being white men. But as I was doing my job and leading these businesses, I was just getting tired of the fact we were sitting in another meeting talking about another woman leaving, or the fact that we weren't paying our women appropriately, or that they weren't all having babies and that's why they left. And so frustration level got to here. I loved what I was doing, but one of my mentors, who's been a remarkable mentor for over a dozen years, said to me, I think you can do more. And I think you want to have bigger impact, and you won't be able to do it in just another big bank. He worked in a big bank. He wasn't, disparaging it. He just knew my passion, and he saw where I wanted to have impact. And I wasn't able to do that in the way that I wanted. So 2 weeks later, I quit my job. I did not have Luminary in my mind yet. And if you had asked me in February of 2018, and if someone said, hey, you're going to launch your own company, I literally would have laughed in your face, because I was a corporate person. I thrived in that environment. I loved having a boss, just like I loved having a coach and teachers. And it wasn't anything in my brain. And then I came from yet another women's event that wasn't super impactful. And I was like, there's got to be a better way to really advance women in the pipeline. Whether they're a business owner, they're in corporate America, they're in transition, they're a teacher. I want to do more to get women through that pipeline so they're promoted earlier, they're paid better, and they have the same amount of opportunities that everyone else does, particularly our male peers. And that's not a negative against men. This is so societal and historical and cultural, right? We've got to break down hundreds of years of barriers to get parity. So, and I knew that I needed men to do that. So Luminary was written down over a 2-week period in creating a business plan, doing the financial projections, realized I wanted to self-fund it on my own because I didn't want somebody else telling me how to build a community for women and male allies when I was the one I was building it for. And I knew what women were facing, particularly in corporate America. And so 8 months later, we launched the business. With the goal of advancing women in the workforce regardless of their professional journey. So if you are a business owner, if you're working at Deloitte, if you are an accountant, if you're a teacher, if you are figuring out your next career, it doesn't matter. We wanted to really level the playing field. So we have no application process. We have multiple tiers of membership. We're an inclusive membership-based organization. And we started out in New York. That's where I'm based. And we built a big physical space, of which Scott has been, and maybe several of you, when we did an event last year, right before Omicron. And 14 months into it, the pandemic struck, and I had to figure out, what we were going to do. The benefit of having a space is great because people can come in person and convene. That was an amenity of what Luminary does as an organization. Everything that we do and did and still do is around programming and content through a community. So we were doing 5 to 7 events, workshops every single week. And so when everyone went to home, yes, we took a massive hit. But what we realized was people weren't just coming to be in a space. They were coming to be part of a community. They were coming to learn new skills, reskill, upskill, and collaborate. And so our programming went online even before the pandemic New York lockdown. And that, 1,000 members has now grown to over 5,000 members. That New York location now virtually has members in 30 countries. And we are working with more than 60 companies. So our model, and I'll finish, is we work with both individuals that want to be part of our organization and part of our community. But then we also work with companies. Back to why did I leave corporate? I wanted to move the needle in the corporate pipeline, right? So I immediately started talking to companies that were in my network and my former clients and the former banks that I worked with and said, I know what you're doing and I know what you're not doing to invest in your pipeline. So let's work together. So companies in the pandemic really doubled down in working with us, and that's been a huge opportunity. And we're working across all sectors to really think about how to invest earlier and more often in the pipeline to retain women, to give them better opportunities. And at the same time, as we think about the small business community, entrepreneurs and founders, how do we ensure women-owned businesses have all of the access that they deserve? Not just capital, introductions, connections, business resources, tools, resources, in order for them to grow their businesses. So we're all coming together under one umbrella, in yes, a physical space, but now a virtual space like all of us.
It's amazing because when I talk to people that are involved with Luminary, I don't know that I've ever heard so many positive things from a community. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm a part of that. It's they're off the charts, excited and invested in everything that you're doing. And that is such an incredible testament to you and the community that you've built. It's just absolutely remarkable. So you were on Cheddar yesterday. There's this little survey that you did in conjunction with Indeed.
Yep.
And tell us a little bit about that and some of the things that you discovered. I know that there's a component, I think, in there about wage disparity and things like that. That gap, I think the number is like it's narrowed by 2 cents in the last 7 years or
A
something.
lot of progress, 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. But tell us a little bit about that. What was the impetus for it? And then what did you find out? And what are we now going to do?
Yeah.
Like, what's the actionable stuff that we can do with that data to make a better world for everybody?
Yeah, so I mean, listen, and I should have mentioned, because there's so many great men on this call. Luminary we've always welcomed all genders, right? We can't do this alone, and I'm very, very vocal about the fact that I really want to include our male allies. I don't want to exclude men. So, and Scott knows this. You walk into our space or our online space, and there are always men. And so in doing our survey, so in 2020, we all know the statistics, right? Over 5 million women left the workforce. By the way, 1 in 3 women still aren't back in the workforce. And a lot of that is predominantly women of color. We know that the pay gap grew, even though we saw the 2 cents. That 2 cents isn't in a year. That 2 cents is since 2015. Right? So we're not making very much progress. We're making progress, but not a ton. And so in 2020, we saw this remarkable exodus of women, the pay gap widening, which means then the gender gap is widening. We saw working parents, caregivers, again, disproportionately impacted, women of color even worse, frontline, all of that kind of coming to a head. Then you follow up with the great resignation, reset, renewal, whatever you want to call it. And now companies coming back and saying, great, the pandemic is ending, come back into the office. And so we really wanted to find out what women wanted in the workplace, not just the McKinsey study, which is great, which really targets one kind of woman. Luminary is all kinds of women, and we wanted to hear from them. And so we went out to a huge group of our community, our partners, our corporate partners, and we said, what do you really want? And what we found was, number one, this is a massive, what we call transitioning population, right? So you've got 80% of our respondents were employed by someone else. These aren't all small business owners. So despite what we read about everyone leaving and going to start their own business, the reality is most people have to stay in the workforce, right? They need stability, they need job security, they need financial security. So let's level set. Then we said 70% of those women say they're kind of satisfied in their role, right? They're satisfied in their role and with their company. 55% though said, but I'm actually thinking about making a major change in the next year, right? So, okay, I got 70% that are saying they're kind of happy, it's all good. There's some flexibility. Yeah, we've all had flexibility because we've all had the ability to work remotely. But yet more than half are saying I'm going to make this big jump. That could be I'm starting my own thing, I'm moving industries, I'm moving companies. 60% said, why are you considering this? Because of pay, right? And then 82% said, men make more than me. Now, that could be objective or subjective, right? Because of salary transparency now, and some states, we might know that, companies are releasing that. And 40% said they were not compensated in their current role. So what does that all mean? These are not findings that are surprising, right? When you look at the pay gap and the gender gap, it's not surprising. But what was surprising was the fact that 40% of all of the women surveyed said they don't self-advocate enough or at all. And so self-advocacy, self-promotion, if you don't like the word promotion, which I am very comfortable with, self-advocacy, if you're not self-advocating, whether you work for someone or not, or you work for yourself and you're pitching to customers or investors or your bank, you are going to fall behind. So if I know that 50%, more than 50% want to make a big change in the next year, and more than 60% say it's because of compensation, and then my deal breakers are work-life balance, flexibility, etc., and I am not self-advocating for that next thing, I'm not prepared, right? So how do we prepare women, not just put it all on our companies to do the hard work, right? So I absolutely expect my company to provide opportunities, to invest in my skills, to give me better pay or pay me appropriately. I want them to pull me up through the pipeline. But you know what? I better be pushing like hell behind them pulling. And self-advocacy is at the heart of that. It's not leaning in, it's not girl boss, it's really figuring out how we advocate better for ourselves in the workplace. That's around compensation, that's around flexibility, that's around, my work-life balance, if you believe in that. That's around what's my next role, right? What's my path to promotion? What's my next step? We also know women are leaving, right? They're not coming back. So how are companies retaining them? This is not, I'm not pushing this all on companies. It can't just be the company. It's got to be the individuals. And I think that is what was glaringly obvious in the study, was that, yeah, I want to make all these changes. I'm not paid enough, but I don't self-advocate. And we teach this every single day. We have courses on this around how do you get better. And the reality is, Scott, when you think about what does that actually mean, self-advocate, the reasons people are not advocating, when we got into this in the survey, anxiety or shyness, right? I'm an introvert, I'm not a great communicator. Fear of retribution, I think in certain industries, that's probably a bigger one than others. Fear of being labeled aggressive. We know that men can be called aggressive and it's not bad. Women that are called aggressive, it's negative. And I will tell you just anecdotally, early on in my banking career, probably way earlier on in my life, I was told I was very aggressive in everything that I did. You can be aggressive without having sharp elbows. And so that original mentor of mine in banking that said, you know what, embrace it and figure out how to leverage it in terms of the audience, right? You're not going to push people out of the way. You can still be aggressive. You can still be passionate, not emotional, right? All of these words that women get called that men don't necessarily get called, aggressive being one of them. So that's what came out of it. And I think that in order to actually make a change, yes, it falls in the company's laps, small, medium, and large, but we've also got to take some responsibility around making sure that we are talking about ourselves, our accomplishments, our value to the organization, why we're an asset, our results, right? If we don't do that, those of you that are small business owners, you don't get anywhere, right? You've got to be out there talking about why you're making an impact. So that's my little soapbox. Sorry, Scott.
No, I absolutely love it. What's one thing that you think in general people can do better to advocate for themselves?
Listen, I think if you have a boss, they better know what you do. They better know what value you're bringing to the team, the others around you, the projects you work on. And it doesn't matter if you're an individual contributor or not. The easiest thing that you can do is write these things down. So I'll ask for a show of hands for those. How many of you done a mid-year performance review in your life or a year-end performance review? Your year-end performance review, and in the banks, at least when I was there, it was all this 360 and you had to write everything down. The reality is, I never remembered what I did in the first half of the year. You're focused on the last quarter because you can't. If you write these down and you keep regular communication with your boss, by the way, even if he never reads them or says he doesn't read them, you have a concrete path to say, I've let you know what I've been doing. This is my mid-year. This is what's leading up to my year end. This is what I brought to the table. This is the revenue I've generated if you're in client facing. Write it down. And the other thing that I would say is practice and perfect, right? It's not easy to walk in and be like, hey, Scott, I'm the best thing since sliced bread, right? But I'm the best thing since sliced bread for this company because of XYZ accomplishments, right? And don't walk in and say, I need this promotion or I need this raise. No. You walk in and you say, I deserve it, and this is why. There's a big difference, and we know this from psychological studies, the difference between the word need and deserve, right? And women often, because they are caretakers or they are the working parents, again, this is a generalization, will go in and say, I need a raise because I'm raising family. Men rarely do that. I deserve it. So those are a couple of tips.
What would you say? I've had
Love it, Deborah. Deborah, exactly. I kept a monthly log and forwarded it, not a task list, but impact work, showing your value. Not like I did this, I checked the box. No,
yeah.
impact, results, what you're driving. What's the X and the Y, right? So absolutely. Sorry, I just saw that in the chat.
I've seen, I've had people come to me, and in our business and something new, we always ask, why are you looking to make a move? And occasionally we'll have somebody say, hey, I found out that I'm getting paid X and Bobby or Jimmy is getting paid Y. What would your recommendation be when you find out that there is a disparity and you're doing essentially the same job?
So that's happened to me, right? But I never wanted it to be about the other person, right? It's about me and my performance. So in my view, the last card you pull is, oh, and by the way, Bob's making more than me, right? Frame it as what you're bringing to the table, the value. I'll give you one example, Scott. So I was at JP Morgan. I was already at a very senior managing director level. I was running a business across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. But I had a new boss. And I also knew I was a newer role. I was like less than a year into it. And it was a risk for them to put me in this role. I knew it. They knew it. But I also knew, because I called a bunch of my friends that worked at Bank of America and everywhere else and said, what are you making? And what is your bonus? And then I had a benchmark. And by the way, none of those people that I called were women, because they would never tell. It was always men, right? And they would love to tell me how much they were making, because it's like a big, it's a big brag. I went into his office and I was so focused on making my case that I had forgotten to talk about my number. And that whole conversation around Bob made more, and he stopped me. And he said, what is the number you want to be at? And I had not even thought about it. And I was pissed, because I had been doing it for years. And he goes, I'm going to give you 24 hours and you come back to me with your number. You've presented your case, but don't compare yourself to Bob, right? Give me your number. So I went home, I called my buddies again. I went back, I gave him the number. And he said, I don't know if I can do this, but we'll see. When in banking, if any of you have been in investment or corporate banking, at least in some of the banks I work, they give you this paper when they give you your bonus and your comp. It's like a big thing, so that you get the paper. Now I have no poker face, and so I get the paper and I immediately put it up, and I pull the paper down, and my boss was grinning ear to ear, and he said, "You perform for us, we perform for you." And he also said, you're probably never going to get that kind of a jump again in your career. So get excited and then move on, right? But the whole point of that was I didn't remember my own advice about knowing my number and going in there. It wasn't about Bob. It was about me. And I think then if you get to those conversations and there's still no movement, then you're pulling the Bob card. Right? Then you're saying, listen, Bob and I are peers, and he makes 20%, 40%, whatever that number is. We've got to rectify this, or I will find another way, and that usually means leaving. If you continue to face that block, it's time to think about leaving. Because if your manager is not interested in making that a better situation, now they likely will never be. So it's a tough pill to swallow, but you think about, are there other sponsors within your organization that you can talk to, HR, but the reality is, in a lot of companies, they may just not care, and they're focused on the bottom line. But guess what? Nobody cares about your career more than you do, so you better take effing control. Excuse my French.
It's phenomenal advice, and you can drop F-bombs anytime you want. So Cate does have to leave us at 12:55 because, I don't know, the New York Times wants to talk to her or something like that. So let's get into the Q&A, and we're going to start with Teddy in California. Teddy, you're up with the great Cate Luzio.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Cate, for taking the time to do this. Pleasure to meet you. My question is about advocacy as a leader. I love the emphasis on individuals taking ownership of their own advocacy. But as I reflect on my own growth as a leader, I can think of several times where I wasn't a great advocate and I want to be better. And so my question for you is, for someone in a leadership role, what is some guidance you have to be a better advocate? And for the folks who maybe are shy or don't take as much initiative, how can you as a leader coach them to improve in that area?
And when you say as a leader, be a better advocate, you mean for yourself or for your team?
For my team.
So, and I love that you recognize that maybe you weren't always the best. Listen, I think this is not, everyone's not great at this. I think you have to look at every situation. My thing is, we always hear stuff about, I need a sponsor, I need a sponsor. You actually just need great managers and you need great peers. Peers can be great sponsors too, and your managers can be great sponsors as well. So whether you feel like you've not been an advocate, ask your team, Teddy. Like, what can I be doing better to support you and your growth? That it's as simple as that, right? Because if your team doesn't feel like you're actually asking them how they're feeling, it goes a long way. When I was, again, and I do this, I don't have a boss now, but when I had a boss, every time I got feedback from my mid-year and year-end, I would go and tell my team what my feedback was from my boss, because I wanted them to know what I needed to work on for my particular manager or my leader. That opened up a great transparent dialogue so that when I was giving feedback to them, they felt like they could open up to me, not only provide me feedback, but also talk about ways to better work together. So I think there's ask, right? Ask and listen, and then action what you hear. There's also you're not always going to be able to do everything that your team wants to, but I think asking and listening is a big part of that can only help you be a better advocate as a leader. What was the second part of your question? Sorry.
Thank you for that. How to coach those who may not be as comfortable taking initiative.
Yes. So I will tell you, there is a phenomenal course that used to be a Google course. It was started by two women at Google. So if you aren't familiar with it, it's called #IamRemarkable. It is outstanding. We teach it as a monthly course at Luminary. I'm a certified trainer, as is half of my staff. I so firmly believe in this. It was started for women, then it became for about women and people from underrepresented communities. Now it's for all. It's a phenomenal course to take. You could do it right online. And I would advocate as leaders, these are great free courses that you can take that are awesome, that really teach these skills. And it's a great way to show to your team, like, I want you to advocate for yourselves. I want you to open up that dialogue. Oftentimes I get from a lot of the banks that I work with, we have a lot of banking partners who are like, great, you're going to tell everyone to ask for a raise. I'm like, you know what? Yep. But you know what? They're also going to be better client negotiators. They're going to be better stakeholders. They're going to be better partners when you can actually have advocacy. And by the way, that advocacy doesn't just stick with themselves. They become better leaders and better leader advocates for those on their team, peers, those below them. I think it's an opportunity. So I would really advocate the I Am Remarkable.
So
thank you, Cate.
This is how damn good Kathy Leckie is. I say to Kathy, can you drop that link in the chat? And she goes, I already did. So once again, Kathy, light years ahead of me.
Well, Lori Richardson actually did the I Am Remarkable at her workshop for women in business and loved it.
Lori Richardson, who I call Lori Legend, and Cate, who I call Cate the Great, two of my favorites. We're going to Kelsey in Texas. Kelsey, you're up with Cate. Did we lose Kelsey? All right. We are going to go to Randy in Florida. Randy, you're up.
Hey, Scott, everyone, thank you. I have two questions, but I'm only going to ask one. If you had a 17-year-old daughter graduating from college next month, going into the world, and you could give them one piece of advice as a woman who's kicking tail in the business environment, what would it be?
Who's in your network? They've got these girls, no offense to boys, girls have to start building their network way earlier. And if that's, hey, that's my dad's friends that are in these different big jobs, then you better go after it. I hear so many young women, well, I want to do it myself. I don't want my dad's or my mom's help. Bullshit. Like, we all need help. So to leverage it, right? So it's who's in your network, and start building that network as early as you can. And that can start in high school, right? That's, hey, I got introduced to my dad's friend at the golf course, whatever. Stay in touch, build your LinkedIn profile so that when you're looking at those internship opportunities, when you just want to have a coffee chat about an industry or a role or what they do, or you're coming out of college, you've already got a built-in network.
Thank you. Love it. Great.
Incredible advice. It's amazing how many schools, career centers don't teach those things that can be absolute game changers. And I talk to young people all the time because I love to. And, I'll say, why do you only have 87 LinkedIn connections? And they're like, well, I'm young. I don't know anybody. I'm like, well, did you have friends? Do they have parents? There's everyone knows so many people that they can connect with and build business relationships that can help them down the road. So it's great advice. And I think it goes for anybody. So Randy, thanks for that. Morgan in New York, you're up.
Well, hello. Yeah. Good afternoon, Cate. Greetings from the Catskills.
Hello.
Question for you. You've spoken about advocacy. I would love to hear about allyship, and I'll couch it in the terms that I like to use. I've learned how to ask this question in my leadership roles. How can I help?
So I love we have a whole series at Luminary on allyship, and it's one of the reasons why I really reinforce the fact that we've never excluded men. We can't do it alone, right? Part of allyship is, I think, education and awareness, right? So here's a great example, Morgan. I run a community and an organization that's really majority women. Our goal is to advance women in the workforce. When I have an event and all I see are women, that's great, but where are the men, right? Why aren't men joining those conversations? We had a panel last month, men in allyship, kick-ass panel of men, and it was still just women. So women can talk all we want, and it's an echo chamber, right? About how we've got to keep doing our work, but if we don't have men, and what I would say for men is reaching out and not just saying, how can I help? It's more like, what can I do, right? Who can I connect you with? How can I help your company? Do I need to make introductions? This is one of the things that I love about Scott when we first got connected. The love was mutual when we had that call, because it was, how do we help each other? Right? I don't think women only want to be helped. We want it to be a reciprocal relationship, right? I just may need a little bit more help right now because I'm still getting paid less. I'm still not in the senior levels, all the stats, but really make it concrete and think about the conversation with the woman. I bet you could have great ideas rather than just, how can I help? Right? So Scott was like, hey, here's what I'm going to do. I love what you're doing. I don't really understand. I'm 100%. I'm going to do my research. And then here are the people I'm going to introduce to you. Boom, boom, boom. He didn't have to say, how can I help? And then leave that to me to kind of explain. He already had ideas. Some of the men that I love will say, you know what? I got to think about it, but I'm going to come back to you with ways I think that I can be of great help to you, whether that's introducing you to people, whether that's making new connections within a company, whether that's just sitting down and say, fire away. I can give you all the lessons learned in my career. So I think I get this all the time from both women and men. How can I help? It's like, no, I don't want you to ask me. You're now giving me a task. Tell me how you think you can help me. And I think in allyship, as we're becoming more and more aware, and this goes to not just for women, this goes for just representation in general, is here are the things that I think I can do to help you. What do you think about that? And then the door now has been opened. There's no awkwardness around, now I have to come back to you, Morgan, 10 times and ask you, well, this is what I think you can do. This is what I think you can do. You've now clearly laid out 1, 2, 3 things, whatever it is, that you feel like where you can have an impact in what I'm trying to do.
Awesome. Love it. And what I took away as well was from those panels, I think it probably starts with showing up, doesn't it?
Totally.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
Just show up. Yeah.
Kelsey is back in the house. So Kelsey, you're up.
Sorry, I had to sign up. I had to kick off a webinar and I was double Zoom logged in, but I'm back. I'm really grateful for the work you do, Cate. I think that I run our community for women in startups, particularly early stage startups. So I'm a big follower and I like what you're doing. And I love how actionable it is. And I was super grateful for survey results coming out. I wanted to ask, and I hope y'all didn't cover this while I was off, was that like the 1 in 3 that are not coming back to the workforce, it's been really difficult for me to find current data on that. So I'm so glad. Thank you for putting it out. Are you finding why they're not coming back? Does it seem like it's I have theories, but I want to hear if we're all able to get that granular, or is it?
So I think what we know is 50% of childcare centers haven't reopened in the United States, right? That's a big factor in this. When you also look at, not all of those 1 in 3 were full-time employed. So they could have been part-time, they could have job elimination. Also a big one, particularly in sectors like education, retail, hospitality. But a number of those where jobs were eliminated are also thinking like, well, do I really want to go back to the restaurant industry or sector, right? Do I really want to go back to being on my feet 12 hours a day? Maybe I could do something different. But that doesn't just happen naturally. So you've really got to start to think about skills, right? Upskilling, starting your own company. You work with startups, right? It's not easy. So I think with that 1 in 3, I think a lot of it still has to do with childcare and figuring out, sort of how to make it work. And then when you dig in further into some of those studies, you have to also look at how many are dual parent households. And is there someone else to kind of to help? And for a lot of the women that were disproportionately impacted in the pandemic, there were a lot of single family households. So I think that's some of the things that we're seeing. I also think depending on the generation, right? If you're in your 40s and 50s, maybe you've already built up a nest egg. Maybe your kids, if you had them, aren't younger anymore. You can take some of these bigger risks. If you're in your early 20s, you don't see those risks yet. You may not be thinking about a family. It's that late 20s, 30s where you're in that, again, I'm not a mom, but prime caretaking. You may need the financial security, job security. You may not be ready. So when you look at the Great Resignation, it's interesting just to see the statistics. I don't think we're going to see the effect of this, or real data is going to come out for a while, because we're still in the pandemic. And with new variants, we'll see how things come. Plus with people, I think the last thing, that I'll add is return to the office, right? We don't know what that impact is going to be for the next few months, because companies are now just saying, hey, we're going back to 3 days a week or 2 days or 4 or 5 days. One of the things we learned from the study, that women love the flexibility. They felt very good about it. Well, we've all had flexibility because that was the whole world. As companies start to say, okay, let's come back. We did this before, we can do it again. I think we'll see in that data, why, right? I don't want to move. I've gotten used to being at home a few days a week. Again, childcare is a big one because we know the childcare centers haven't reopened.
Yeah. I actually think it's really so positive to the point of the transition that you said, that people are getting into a new field. That's also going to take time. It's kind of optimistic too, to think about. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Backed up a lot of what I was guessing. It's nice to hear the research supported.
Love it. We are going to go to my friend Anna Morgan in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, calling me out here. So for the up and comers that are on the line that aren't yet where a lot of you all are, when you are faced with executive leadership, our male counterparts that are interacting in a way that maybe is not the most professional and addressing us in a way that we're not comfortable with. How would you advise women, particularly, to handle those situations in the moment? Because I, speak to job seekers quite a bit about why they're leaving. I've had my own experiences. And I know, personally, when you're hearing or being addressed in a certain way, and in your mind, you're like, I'm not that person. I'm not your dear. I'm not your daughter. I'm not your wife. These things. But you're in that moment of fight or flight and struggling to professionally address the situation. So I'd be curious, because of your vast knowledge, what you might advise in that type of situation.
So I've had many situations where it's been that, and I've been burned too, because I've called them out in the meeting, and that didn't go over well. My biggest advice is take it offline, right?
Yeah, that's
the
what
reality is. Most people, I tend to think the good in people, right, versus immediately going to the negative. They may not even be aware, right, that they're doing it. And so taking it offline and having a real conversation, that also opens up better dialogue, right? Because the minute you call someone out in a meeting, they're embarrassed. They want to combat what you've just said. They become defensive. That doesn't help any relationship. It also makes it uncomfortable for everyone else. I think if it goes in a different direction around, obviously, where it's harassment, et cetera, like that, that's an HR conversation. But I would say take it offline. And
that's typically, always take 48 hours to let, process any decision, and then look to a mentor to kind of check things, and then go from there. But
I would say, if you come out of a meeting and you're feeling very uncomfortable, the best thing to do is say, because a lot of times people forget too, right? I mean, we're so busy. Is sending an email or saying, hey, listen, I just want to cover a couple of things offline that were discussed in the meeting. Again, the reality is that person probably didn't even realize it, and will likely be thankful to you for bringing it to their attention. I had a boss at Bank of America that was a massive hugger, and he was not a bad guy. I love him. He's a mentor. But I wasn't uncomfortable with it when he would hug. Others were uncomfortable. They're like, oh, he is very touchy-feely. Didn't bother me because I knew that's his guy. He's like Joe Biden. But or Andrew Cuomo, but it didn't bother me, but it made others. So I remember someone addressed it with him. It wasn't even directed towards them. They went to him because then he had a conversation with me and said, someone actually brought me in their office and said it made others uncomfortable. Does it make you uncomfortable? I didn't even realize that he was really doing it. But I think just having that open dialogue, by the way, if the person is not willing to even consider, then, then it's a whole different conversation. But I am such a fan of having conversation, even if it's let's go grab a coffee so we're not in the office.
Yep.
Right.
You make it much more personalized than personal.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, great leaders. I think, they praise in public and they criticize and coach and do those things in private. So we have time for one last question before Cate leaves us. So we're going to Florida. Kathy Slayton.
Hey, thanks, Scott. So, Cate, thanks for making your time this morning or this afternoon for us. So this is, I guess, more not necessarily so much of a question as it is a comment, and I just wanted to get some of your feedback on it. So, and I definitely appreciate just the advocacy that you're promoting for women, and and how to build that. But I got to tell you, some of the biggest adversaries that I have encountered in the workplace have been women. I mean,
hell yeah, me too.
Nasty, brutal. I mean, they say that, oh, women are we should be,
the mean girl.
No, mean girls.
Yeah.
Plural, tear you down and just cut you off at the knees. So so just kind of give us some quick feedback on just maybe how to navigate around that, or some advice, or, kill them with kindness, all that good stuff. Yeah, that works for a little bit, but what are your thoughts on that?
So I've written a lot about this because I think there are plenty of mean girls in all industries, including women's communities. My thing is, give them the benefit of the doubt, and same advice I gave to Anna. I have conversations with these people and say, what's going on? Like, is there something that I've done wrong, or is there something that I've miscommunicated? Because let me tell you how you've made me feel. Right. And I had those conversations in the banking world as well. I wanted to nip that in the bud, and not just where it was directed at me. If I saw that happening to others, like, okay, let's be transparent here and call it like we see them. And if that person continues to do it, that's not someone that I'm ever going to think of as an advocate. I probably think they're probably bad mouthing me in another room. Right? So then I have to build up advocacy in other areas or with other people. It's the same thing as like when you're at a company and people say, get a mentor and a sponsor. And for 2 or 3 years, you're kind of sitting there hoping someone picks you. If no one's nurturing you, if no one's picking you or sponsoring you, you're probably not in the right organization. Right? And it's time to make a change. I give people 3 strikes and then they're done. Like, there's no coming back from it, because they always show their true colors. If I've had that conversation and then there's no change, and by the way, they may have feedback for me too. I have to be open to reciprocal feedback, right? But it's really hard. I think it's harder because the minute you call out a woman, then you're a bad woman for calling them out, right? As someone who runs a women's organization, if I criticize or give feedback to another woman, it's like, whoa, what, aren't you going against everything that you stand for? No, I'm a manager and a leader, and I'm actually trying to create impact. If I don't see that happening, or I see bad behavior, I want to address it. But there's only, Kathy, so many things that you can do for that person to change. And if they can't change, then, I'm also of the opinion they'll likely get found out.
Yep. If a great book, Heather Monahan's written 2 great books, yes. And her TED Talk is kind of centered around just that. So
yes, I totally agree.
If anyone hasn't picked up her latest book, definitely do. So unfortunately, we are pretty much out of time, but we have 2 minutes left. So I'm going to ask one quick question. Okay. What is the one thing that you think has come out of this pandemic that's really positive?
My network has, for me at least, has expanded 5 times. And I'll tell you why. You guys, maybe you saw me do it, maybe you didn't. I took a picture of all the Zoom screens, right? And I've been saying this since day 1 of the pandemic. People will say, well, it's been really hard to network in a pandemic. We're all virtual. This is the easiest time to network, because now I see everyone's names, and now I can actually follow up with Kelsey, and I can follow up with Anna, and I can follow up with Morgan. If I was at a conference or a meeting, it's in and out. I might get a couple of business cards and no follow-up, no relationship building happens. So I think for me, and hopefully for lots of people, this has been the time to really build and nurture and invest in your network. Because if you didn't, you wasted a massive opportunity over the last 2 years.
Phenomenal. Cate, I cannot thank you enough for carving out time, especially now. I know things are absolutely crazy for you in such a great way. I am always inspired by you, and I cannot thank you enough.
No, thank you for having me. I love what you've built and what you're building. I put my LinkedIn earlier, so that's where my favorite place to connect is. So please, and I included the Luminary web address. But this was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And sorry, I have to run.
Thank you, Cate.
See you soon,
for all of you, we're going to do a little overtime. So if anyone wants to hang out and chat, we certainly can do that.